Hello, and welcome to an in-depth discussion of Dorian Gray. The book discussed today is A Picture of Dorian Gray, written by Oscar Wilde. We will be focusing on the metaphor that the portrait represents. The book focuses around three men: Basil, Dorian Gray, and Lord Henry. The group is infatuated with the looks of Dorian Gray. Basil has romantic feelings for Dorian Gray. Basil also paints a portrait of Dorian, which causes issues within the group.
When Dorian meets Lord Henry, they have a conversation in which he realizes that he will turn old and he will age, but his portrait that Basil painted will stay young forever. So he wishes that he could swap places with the painting, and that's exactly what happens.
Oh, so in a way he wanted to immortalize himself?
Yeah, so the painting, so by swapping places with the painting is the one that ages and Dorian is the one that continues to look young.
Oh, God.
Dorian and Sybil were engaged. Dorian ends up ending the engagement because he realizes that Sybil is skin deep. Because of that, Sybil ends up killing herself.
In the story, Dorian finds out that Basil is obsessed with him. He is angered by the fact that Basil has painted the portrait of him. As mentioned earlier, the painting represents his soul, so whatever appears on the painting reflects what he has done, and vice versa. He decides to kill Basil, and he does this by stabbing him. Blood appears on his hand and is later seen on the painting.
At the end of the novel, Dorian looks at his painting and he realizes how old it is and how much blood on his hands he has. And Dorian becomes so angry with the painting that he ends up stabbing it, and in doing so he kills himself and he trades places with the painting. The painting represents his soul, his consciousness, and every single time he sins, it's flecking his the fairness of his painting. So we've talked a lot about Dorian and what great lengths he went to hide the painting from the outside world. He hid it from Basil and he hid it from Lord Henry and everybody else. His focus on hiding his painting also brings us to the idea of his public and private life.
This is similar to the idea of the id, ego, and superego, because it's a psychology thing that Sigmund Freud came up with, and it's basically all the different parts of our subconscious. The id is basically it's your unconsciousness, and it represents all your immoral ideals and all the bad things that you wouldn't want to present to others, while the superego is all your moral ideals, and it's your good side. So basically, if looking at it, it's it is the little devil on your shoulder, and the angel would be the superego, while the ego is a mediator between the two, and it's what people see. It's what you show to others.
As described by Sigmund Freud, the ego represents what may be called reason and common sense, in contrast to the id, which contains the passions.
Dorian's id is represented by his portrait because it's basically the hidden part of him, which is the unconscious. When Dorian kills Basil, it is after he sees that the painting gives him a sinister smile. The portrait is also hidden from everyone else in the story, so it kind of represents how Dorian has a private and a public life, and Dorian's face is really nasty in the painting, but on the outside he looks really well kept and good. So this shows the two sides of him.
He even goes to great lengths to have people not see his portrait. He keeps it in a room in his home, and he's the only one that has a key for that room. So that just shows that that's definitely something that he doesn't want others to know about him.
And a lot of it is keeping your desires and whatever kept down. So you can see that it's really important to Dorian to keep his portrait, which is representative of his id, like hidden, and his public persona, which like his ego or his super ego, which everybody sees. He looks perfect, and everybody perceives him as perfect. Like at one point in the story, Basil has a hard time believing that Dorian would ever do anything bad because of how perfect he looks. So it's a clear, like, how his id and ego are separate.
And a better way to get you guys to visually understand this can be seen when Sigmund Freud used a diagram of an iceberg partially submerged underwater, where the id is the biggest part of the iceberg, is completely hidden from like a bird's eye view. And it just goes to show that most of your intentions and most of what makes you you is unseen by everyone else, but on the surface level, you have your ego and your superego, which everyone sees.
So just like the iceberg theory, Dorian Gray hides his life, he hides his id, and he lets his superego show. And similarly, the author Oscar Wilde does that in his own life when he hides his private life and lets his public life show.
Okay. Oscar Wilde was an Irish poet that was born in 1854, and he was also a known homosexual. Throughout his life, he was persecuted for his sexual orientation, and the struggles that he encountered in his life often show up in his book. One of these characters that can be seen is Basil, the artist.
Yeah, so basically, the story can be a representation of Oscar Wilde's life, because, as said before, Oscar Wilde was homosexual, and in the story, we can see that Basil was really obsessed with Dorian Gray, so it kind of reflects Oscar Wilde's own life and what he went through during his life.
Yeah, he married to, who did you say it was?
Constance Lloyd.
Yeah, and he was married to her, but like he had an affair with the man later on, and he was incarcerated at one point.
He also had multiple affairs.
Yeah, so you can see like his private and his public life. Him marrying Constance Lloyd is like very public, but he like hides it behind his like private
Affairs.
Right.
Yeah. We'll just call them that. Next one.
You know what? That actually kind of reminded me of the book you read with the girl Isabel.
Oh, that was my book, The Lady in the Looking Glass by Virginia Woolf. Yeah, Isabella hides her private life behind like what she makes public with. She puts on like a facade.
In The Lady in the Looking Glass, Virginia Woolf says, "She stood naked in that pitiless light, and there was nothing. Isabella was perfectly empty. She had no thoughts, she had no friends, she cared for nobody. As for her letters, they were all bills. Look as she stood there, old and angular, veined and lined, with her high nose and her wrinkled neck. She did not even trouble to open them." So basically, this quote comes from the part where Isabella is staring at herself in the mirror, and she's kind of just realizing how fake her life has been. That kind of comes from the part where it goes, as for her letters, they were all bills. The letters that made her seem like she was super social and had a lot of friends, they were actually just bills and dues that she owed. She's kind of just realizing how fake her life has been at that point.
Right, and it's kind of similar to Dorian Gray because he's hiding his life behind a facade too. Like, everything looks perfect on the outside. He looks perfect on the outside. Isabel looks perfect on the outside. But then the looking glass and the portrait kind of have like a similar ability to like reveal the truth about their owners. So
Actually, I disagree. I think that with Dorian Gray, it's more of a morality issue where he himself knows that he's doing sins and feels guilty for them. But with Isabel, she's just more afraid to show her loneliness to other people, but she hasn't done anything wrong.
okay, that's really true. Rodney makes a good point. Isabella's isn't exactly a morality issue. Dorian literally like trades his morality for youth and beauty, which kind of is a example of one selling their soul to the devil.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Like, I feel like we see that a lot today with rappers. Like, I don't know, it's not like a big thing. It's not on the news a lot, but apparently like rappers like Lil Uzi Vert and like Juice WRLD, like they talk about the devil a lot in their songs, and like even selling their souls. So it's kind of crazy how like stuff like this is still talked about in modern day.
Yeah, towards the end of the story where, like, Dorian is becoming very paranoid, an old woman that has seen him throughout the years and not aged, like, she mentions also that it's, like she speculates, like, that it's a possibility that he, in fact, has sold his soul to the devil because he has not aged and she has. And this is when she's talking to Sybil's brother.
Actually, guys, I don't know if you know this, but the whole selling your soul to the devil idea, it comes from a German legend. It's called the Legend of Faust. It's a legend about a scholar who sells his soul for power and knowledge.
I actually heard about that, and there's also a play version of this book, and it's by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. And in this play, Goethe quotes Mephistopheles, offers to him, "Come bind thyself by prompt indenture, and thou mine arts with joy shalt see. What no man ever saw, I'll give to thee."
Oh, so Mephistopheles is kind of like the devil in this. And he's like giving Faust, he's offering him like an exchange of knowledge for being his servant.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It's like, even though it's very similar to Dorian, because even though it's not like specifically said that he sells his soul to the devil or anything, it's very similar in the sense that the fact that he switched places with the painting and he stays young is not something that happens. So and in that whole process, he also like lets go of all his morals and like does things that he wouldn't have. Well, we don't know that, but it's not something that he would have possibly have done because he ends up going paranoid and crazy towards the end.
Yeah, I see that. And even though like Faust is more an example of like knowledge and power over morality, it's still like this idea of like Dorian's is youth and beauty over morality. So they're still like trading and exchanging.
So really, regardless of if he sold his soul to the devil or not, he didn't get away with everything that he did without any consequences. And it kind of seemed like he was going to at the beginning because he was kind of walking around still beautiful and the painting was getting all of the damage whenever he would do something wrong. But then towards the end, it eventually came out that it was him and he turned ugly and the painting was beautiful again.
This kind of reminds me of the whole idea of karma and how everything you do comes full circle and that no action has no consequence. Thank you all for listening to our in-depth discussion of the picture of Dorian Gray. To recap, we analyzed the psychological standpoint of what the portrait of Dorian Gray represented. We also went in depth in the public and private life of Oscar Wilde and related this to Virginia Woolf.